Good morning, everybody here aboard Battleship Iowa and out into our virtual community across the country and throughout the nation. Today is the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. As we recognize this special anniversary as our veterans continue to dwindle from the greatest generation, I like to bring up the important fact that here in San Pedro, where the Battleship Iowa is currently open as a museum, this was home to many of those sailors and their family. Up until a few years prior to Pearl Harbor, the battle fleet was based here right in our backyard for several years. Families were touched by that incident in the local community. Veterans that were present that day lived with that memory forever. And I was blessed to spend about 21 years of my life, well, the past 21 years of my life, getting to know many of those veterans. While my grandfather was still alive, I traveled the country and went to Pearl Harbor for several of those anniversaries. Today I'm wearing my 75th anniversary hula shirt, or aloha shirt, that I picked up at the 75th anniversary, which was also the same time that we interred my grandfather in the country. The Pearl Harbor ceremonies at Pearl Harbor were always a ceremony to remember, with many Pearl Harbor survivors present. And as you got to know some of these great men and women that were sailors, soldiers, and the airmen of their day, which I think probably there were soldiers even at that point as Army, as part of the Army Air Corps, you realize that they're everyday Americans, everyday proud Americans that served their country proudly. They paid the ultimate sacrifice, and they were taken off guard in a area that was frankly peaceful and what we would call, I'm trying to think of the word, but what we would call, I guess, heaven in some ways in Hawaii. At that morning at 7:55 a.m., they were caught off guard by the Japanese Navy. And we'll forever remember that 80 years later. We must not forget, as we build the National Museum of the Surface Navy here aboard the Iowa, we remember all of those that served our country, but especially those that served aboard the ships right there in Pearl Harbor. Those were Surface Navy ships. They were Surface Navy sailors. They were heroes of America, and we must never forget their sacrifices. So please join me today as we remember the fallen of Pearl Harbor. And I specifically want to also remember those that carried on for years and years and years after, with the horrible memories that they had of that day, of that tragedy. And we must look at our veterans today that continue with the memories that they have of their service, and they continue to fight. And us as Americans must rally around every veteran, regardless of what era of service they had, to make sure that we support them as proud Americans and support them during their healing process, and never forget those that paid the ultimate sacrifice. Please join me in welcoming Pearl Harbor survivor's son, J.J. Johnston, who has been a crew member here aboard the Iowa, and I was blessed to have him and his wife at my grandfather's interment 5 years ago, yesterday at the Punch Bowl. J.J.?
Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank you all for being here. This is, I consider it a special day. I'll give you a little bit of information about my father. He was a 18-year-old kid right out of San Pedro High School. Found himself in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, aboard a destroyer, USS Medford DD-389. At the time of the attack, he was working in the mess decks, getting ready for the cleanup after the morning meal. Someone stuck his head in the hatch and says, "Hey, the Japanese are bombing us." And he went, "Yeah, right." And then he heard some explosions. He looked outside, and sure enough, there was smoke and fire and all kinds of noise. His battle station was on the forward 50 caliber. So he went up there, and the guy who was the operator was a guy whose name was Thomas Johnson, not Johnston, and he was one of the men in the 50. My dad was feeding it ammunition until it overheated, and they had to stop. He then went back on the fantail, and he had a clear view of what was going on. The Japanese aircraft would come in behind the fantail and make their turn towards the battleships to drop their torpedoes or whatever. He said one of them came so close, he looked up at the guy, and the guy looked right at my father. He said, if I was to see him today, I'd know who he was. They were that close. Again, he was only 18 years old, and he admitted to me that he was not scared, because Captain Young, their skipper, made sure that everybody knew what to do so like this ever happened. He did say about 9 o'clock that night, it hit him. He went up on the main deck. There's a chief up there lighting a cigarette, and he goes, hey chief, what the hell just happened here? Chief looked at him and says, we just went to war, kid. And that's when it really hit him, what happened. And he survived every major engagement except for Midway and Coral Sea. They were the first ship hit at Guadalcanal. They got hit again at New Guinea. And once again, they got kamikazed at the Battle of Leyte Gulf. When the war ended, he was in Okinawa off the coast. They sent him into Tokyo Bay because he had to go to the armories and try to disable some of the weaponry that was still there. And he was, this is kind of a funny part, he rode the battleship North Carolina from Tokyo Bay all the way to Pearl Harbor. When he got to Pearl Harbor, he spent a couple days there. Then he got on the carrier USS Saratoga. And as they got underway, there was probably 6,000 people on board, sailors, Marines, nurses, soldiers, whatever. And as they passed the Arizona, what was left of it, they do the standard attention to port, hand salute. And as they did that, the ship's band played the song Aloha Oi, which in Hawaiian means farewell to thee until we meet again. And he didn't get to go back until the 50th anniversary. I'm a little teary-eyed. Sorry about that. That always breaks me up. But he never held any animosity towards the Japanese. In fact, when I was a kid, a lot of my friends were Japanese Americans, and they were more than welcome in my house. And his thing was, the war's over, we won, let's move on. In 1962, he joined a new organization called the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. He became a life member, and he was the president of the founding chapter in Gardena, California, Chapter 1 at one time. So he took it very seriously. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2001, and I did have a chance to talk with him 4 days before he passed away. He was still in really good health. He told me everything that happened that day, from the time he woke up to the time he went to bed. I wrote it down. I gave a copy to Larry here over here, and he read it, what, 2 years ago, Larry? 75th now. He read it with the news crew on there. Pretty interesting story. I would have brought it, but you've all heard it, so I'm not going to do it again. There were some strange things that happened during that attack, and I've done a lot of research on this. On board the battleship, which was also a target ship, USS Utah, she went down with 58 sailors still aboard and one baby girl. The baby girl was the daughter of a chief whose wife had twins. One of them passed away. He had it in an urn in his locker. And the Utah didn't have a chaplain, but they had one ordered in. They were going to go out next sea period and put those ashes in the water. She's still there. Her sister comes every year and visits, and she's being guarded by 58 men. Another funny thing that happened, there's a couple of them. Aboard the Jarvis, USS Jarvis, a destroyer like my father, was tied up next to my dad's ship. As the Japanese planes were coming in, they had a guy back on the after deck house with a sack full of potatoes. And he was throwing them at these aircraft as they come by. Now, whether he hit any or not, probably not. But my dad said he was, quote, cussing a blue streak. So, and that was kind of comical. Also, on the ship to the port side of the Mugford was the gunboat Sacramento. Now, the blast from the Mugford's 5-inch gun blew the flag off the fantail. Subsailor went below decks, come up with a little flag about 5 by 5, put it back up on the staff, and as he did so, everybody on the Mugford and the Jarvis cheered this guy, so he took a bow. And I thought that was pretty darn cool. There were many stories of bravery that occurred that day, and I got a whole bunch of them in my head, but I'm not going to go on and on. Now, when my father did pass away, I kind of got into the Pearl Harbor thing, and I did a lot of studying on it. At one time, I would consider myself an authority on it. Now, unfortunately, I've forgotten a lot of it, but I remember the good stuff. I didn't know my dad was a Pearl Harbor survivor until somewhere I was like maybe 9 or 10 years old. We were watching Victory at Sea. I'm sure all the older folks all watching that. And there was a shot of Pearl Harbor, and he just about turned white. He said, "Dad, what's going on?" He goes, "I was there." I did not know that. In fact, later on he would talk about it, and of all the sea battles he was in, that's the only one that he would talk about. It was Pearl Harbor. He wouldn't talk about the rest of them other than a little bit of this and that. And he'd always put something funny that happened in there. He was really good about that. But I miss him. I wish he was here. I'm sure he's looking down at us. Pearl Harbor is a very special place for me. Whenever I go over there, I make it a point to go out to the Arizona and pay my respects to the sailors, soldiers, and Marines. Sailors and Marines that are entombed in the ship. There were 1,177 men that were killed on that ship that day, and there's about 900 of them still inside the ship on watch. It's a very sacred place. If you haven't been there, if you go there, I defy you to not break down in tears. But that's all I have to say for now. I could go on and on, but I'll keep it sort of short. I want to introduce Joe Santee here. He's our next speaker. His dad wrote a poem some time ago, and he would like to read that. It's about Pearl Harbor. Thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't bore you too much.
Hello, my name is Joseph Santee. This is a poem that was written by my father. This year is actually this is a poem written by my father, also named Joseph Santee, though he had different middle names. So he is a poet for the Hugh Hewitt Show under the pen name Tarzana Joe, and this past Thursday he recorded it and it was read out the following Friday to multiple people that would tune into the show. And so here it is. 80 years of Sundays. Sundays start with service all across the nation, thanking God and praying for the beauty of creation, the vastness of the ocean, the blueness of the sky, the innocence of children, every time they ask us why. Every day we labor, life puts us to the test, working for our daily bread, but Sundays are for rest. Except one Sunday morning, and at what a horrid cost. The vastness and the blueness and the innocence were lost. 80 years of Sundays, can you feel them passing by? All of us, like children, continue asking why. Those to us are speaking, can you hear the things they're saying? They want us to remember them, they want us to keep praying. Sundays are for lessons, practical and prayerful. When it comes to freedom, you can never be too careful. The greatest heroism that our country's ever known, may we honor all their services with service of our own. Thank you.
At this time, Battleship Larry and I are going to go up and ring the bell. We're going to ring it 24 times, one for each 1,000 men that were men and women that were killed that day.
That concludes our brief Pearl Harbor Day ceremony. As we go about our business today, let's remember those that paid the ultimate sacrifice, but all of the veterans that served our country that were there prior, in Pearl Harbor during World War II and even today. Once again, proud Americans that have served our country since the founding of our country. They're men and women just like ourselves that put their lives on the line for what we believe in. And frankly, and I'm going to keep rattling here, but we must remember that our way of life, what we see right here across the water, is trade and commerce. The way we know of freedom, it's not just the freedom, but the way we know life as Americans. This right here is made possible because we remain a country that allows ships to sail our oceans and open seas, allows commerce to make it here, allows Americans to live free and other populations across the world to live the free life. So please say thanks, help a veteran if they need it, refer them to services if they need it, and remember those that really served our country and paid the ultimate sacrifice, especially today on Pearl Harbor Day. Thank you all.
GoPro, stop recording.